Hey, deserving listeners, I thought we would recap episode 1 through 6 because the first episode I did of these reaction videos, I just did episode 7, and a lot of you were saying, you should go back to the beginning. So let's go back to the very beginning of Ed and Rose and work our way all the way through episode 8. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I am a therapist and a professor in couples therapy. You should know that primarily what I do is a podcast, which is in audio form, and it's available on your phones.
My track record with relationships is not very good. I was married for 2 years, but I did get a beautiful daughter out of that marriage, Tiffany. She's 29 years old. We are pretty much two peas in a pod.
Okay, so I'm guessing a lot of people are commenting on the fact that his daughter is a number of years older than the woman that he's dating, Rose, and how that is gross or sick or some kind of problem. As I've talked about in other episodes, there's no empirical evidence demonstrating that age difference in a relationship is a problem. There's also no definitive evidence that exploitation is happening yet. Again, I haven't seen all the episodes, but I'm always hearing potential judgments of society and the internet when I watch this. I'm always wondering why shows like this are actually really popular. And I think one of the reasons why shows like this is popular is, there's probably a lot of reasons, but I think one of the reasons is it gives us a chance through Schadenfreude to judge other people, to scream at the TV screen and go like, ew, that's gross, and it makes us feel better. When we lack self-esteem, when we lack power, when we are, shall we say, immature and black and white thinkers, we tend to look for things that are easy targets for us. In a way, it's a form of bullying that it's an outgrowth of, or another form of bullying that you'll see different from the playground. On the playground, when you're insecure and you're young and you feel powerless and you've been traumatized or you feel bad about yourself, you'll find a scapegoat, an easy target to bully. You'll put them down and it elevates you very temporarily, and it doesn't ultimately elevate you in a permanent or functional way. Now, again, I'm not saying Ed is a healthy, functional person, but I can just imagine people going, ew, his daughter is older than Rose. That's disgusting. Look, if Rose was 13, then yes. But Rose is a grown adult. Now, I've seen episode 7, so I know that Rose appears to have the potential to have some immaturities that would lead her to be easily exploited. Obviously, the privilege difference between Ed and Rose is there. And as we watch these episodes, I'm sure I'll have more to say. But I just want us to be careful about making such judgments without further data. We always want data. Now, we might not get that data from this show because a key part of the 99% of the data would be to sit down with Rose and say, how are you feeling? Be honest with me. Do you feel exploited? Do you feel like this is a choice? Do you feel like Ed has so much power over you that he can mold you into who he wants you to be? Do you feel like you can push back? Do you feel safe enough to push back? These are critical questions that I hope we get an answer to through these episodes. But without knowing that, it's hard to say, but we'll see if we get that data.
But on gifts and shipping, I've probably spent over $5,000.
What are you sending her?
I think another part of the reason why these shows are entertaining or why they're watchable, or I don't know, is for privileged Americans to sort of revel in our privilege, maybe call it privilege porn or something. There are most people around the planet are not as privileged as Americans are in terms of economically and access to resources and this kind of thing. And if you've ever traveled or you have come from those societies, or you live in a very struggling society in the United States, then you know this to be true. If you're middle class or higher and you've always lived in that situation, that like I have actually, then it's hard to imagine just how desperate some people are living. And for Ed to spend just a little bit of money, extra money that he has to send stuff to her and her family in the Philippines can be sometimes a matter of life and death for these people. And just because they're smiling in pictures doesn't mean that they're not deeply suffering and not deeply worried about food and shelter and safety and healthcare and other kinds of things. So to send like an extra bit of materials can be a huge deal for these people. So even though they're asking for this, Rose and her family, it doesn't necessarily mean that he is only a meal ticket. When you come from a society that is struggling, and you're also a very tight-knit family culture, and also in the Philippines, you tend to have a lot of kids. So say you have 8 kids in a family. One of those kids happens to strike it rich, literally by meeting someone in a privileged society, and that other person has a lot of money. The expectation in that family is, well, that sibling is going to start sending us money because we are so poor and now they are so rich, and we are a family and we help each other. And if I struck it rich, I would send money back home too. For people in my culture in the United States, that is not typically what is done. It's seen as unseemly and somehow, I don't know, disrespectful to people. People don't even talk about their income in polite conversations. So for example, with my family, I have 3 siblings. If one of us ended up earning a lot more money than someone else, there would be zero expectation that that person would give some of their money to the other siblings. And if a poorer sibling were to ask a richer sibling for money, it would be seen as really unseemly. But that's because in my circle, to have the baseline of one's privilege and one's income is probably good enough for most survivability and comfort. But when your entire family and your entire community is struggling so severely, and one of the people in your family manages to make it out of that and has the ability to send money back, then everyone's like, well, that's just what's going to happen. And if you see in your community 1 out of 10 families that happens and it becomes the norm, then there's sort of a routine to it. I'm guessing that we'll see more of that routine clash, that culture clash between Ed and Rose and her family as this progresses. Now, I'm not saying one way is right and one way is wrong. I hope that that's clear. What I'm saying is that when you understand the cultural and societal context from which people live, then it helps you to understand their behavior better. And when you come from 2 different cultures, sometimes there's a clash there that there can be misunderstanding. So I'm not saying Ed has to send money to Rose and her family. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if they ask him for money, the best situation is for him to understand where they're coming from so that he doesn't misunderstand it. Now, like I said, it's possible that Rose is exploiting him. Rose's family is trying to exploit him. I don't know. The exploitation would be that Rose doesn't really love him, doesn't really want to be with him in the long term. That would be where the exploitation would take place. But if Rose does want to spend the rest of her life with him and it is in love with him and does want to have a normal, significant other romantic relationship with him, then the ask for money, it might be considered much more typical to a situation. Anyway, let's continue to watch.
I'm so wrapped up in being in love and excited that I finally met somebody after 28 years that I haven't thought about how this is, affecting Tiffany.
Maybe it's a good idea for you to stop and think about those things.
Yeah, Ed's mom is giving some good advice here. This is something that I see a lot, and maybe I see a lot on these kinds of shows. As Ed says, he's like, well, I've been so focused on falling in love and moving forward that I haven't really been thinking about how this whole thing might be affecting my daughter. This is something that I wish more people would pay attention to. Some of you listeners out there, some of you viewers out there might have experiences where your parents or a family member suddenly got married or suddenly was in a relationship and it progressed really quickly in a way that worried you or affected you in some ways. There's a way to navigate that transition that is more functional than others. For Ed in particular, he went to his daughter, and his daughter is refusing to even talk to him because he is moving forward with this relationship with Rose. Obviously, Ed cares about his daughter and his relationship. I'm wondering how that conversation went down where she refused to talk with him about it, or the history of the relationship between Ed and his daughter is also in question here. So, but generally speaking, I think it's incredibly important that if you are in Ed's shoes, that whether it's some other kind of variation on this, even if you're just dating someone in your own town, that you check in with those who will probably be affected by this. Us Americans, we tend to think like we're individuals. We're not really connected to other people. We're not accountable to other people. And when we fall in love, we tend to think of it as well, I'm in love, and I'm in love with this person, and they're in love with me, and everything else doesn't really matter. But the reality is all of us are embedded in an emotional and relationship system. And although we have the right to date and marry who we want to, we need to consider that when two people come together, they both come from a system, and those systems now are together in some way. There's a Venn diagram there of overlap that is happening. And there's a way to help those two systems mesh in a way that is functional. And to ignore that is to set the stage for a lot of bad things to happen. For example, if Ed does not get his daughter on board, or doesn't make his daughter feel heard, or doesn't make his daughter feel whatever it is that she needs to feel for this to move forward for her, then, say he does marry Rose, then months later, the daughter finally says, okay, I guess I have to meet this woman now because she's my stepmom and she's younger than me. And the daughter has had all this time to build up this resentment and hurt that her father is basically choosing another woman over her. Maybe that's how she feels about it. And then when they meet, the daughter and the younger stepmom, they both come to the table with a tremendous amount of negativity and awkwardness that can cause the interaction to explode. And then now you're in a really bad situation. Bad things are being said, and a lot of damage is being done. And you might not ever be able to bring those two people together. Whereas if Ed and his daughter talk about this, Ed listens to his daughter. The daughter listens to her father. That's another part of this, is like, if you are in that position where you're the one feeling victimized by your family members forging ahead with another relationship, you should try to honor that person's life. Just because it's inconvenient to you that your father is dating someone else and marrying someone else doesn't mean that that overrides their needs. Ed has a tremendous need for companionship, as most people do. And his daughter should acknowledge that at the same time that Ed should acknowledge the daughter's feelings and whatever else is at play here, which we don't know. So I encourage everyone to do that. Now, it's easier said than done. There can be a lot of bad blood around things like this. Maybe the daughter is still upset that Ed and her mom split up in the first place, and there's a lot of unresolved feelings about this. But what a great opportunity to get that on the table, have some healing, have some grace towards each other, deepen the relationship. So hopefully Ed can do that with his daughter.
What if you see me and you run away?
I don't know what I think.
What do you mean you don't know what you think? I have not been exactly honest with Rose. She's told me she's 5'2". So I said, yeah, I'm 5'2" too, and I'm not. I'm 4'11".
Okay, people, I've seen this behavior so many times. Do not lie to people. You went to kindergarten. Your kindergarten teacher told you, don't lie. Just remember that. Don't lie. It doesn't help. To lie about your height, to lie about your age, to lie about your past, what do you think is going to happen? Ed, you say that you're 5'2" and you're really 4'11". What do you think is going to happen? You're eventually going to meet, and she's eventually going to learn that you're not 5'2". And what does that say about you? That you would lie about such things. People, stop it. People do this all the time when they're online dating. They will put up a picture of themselves that's 15 years old. And then when they meet up in person, the other person's like, whoa, you look a lot different than you did on your online picture. Don't do this. I understand the compulsion to put across your best self, but there's a line between, putting on makeup and making sure you have good posture and just lying to someone. It's completely self-destructive. Again, I get the impulse, but your kindergarten teacher taught you this. And when you were 5, you agreed with it. You said, yes, it's bad to lie. No one wants to be lied to. It's not a good start to a relationship. Now, I'm going to take a guess and say that Rose isn't going to, that's not going to be a deal breaker, the difference between 5'2" and 4'11", honestly. But when I see this, I always just think, oh, people, lying is immoral. It's wrong. And it hurts people's feelings and it destroys people's trust in you. And if that's how you want to start a relationship, then you're welcome to the problems that will create. If you have difficulty with your self-esteem, let's work on that. Let's work on Ed. Hey, dude, you're 4'11". Who gives a shit? It is what it is.
But why me? Why me? Why do you love me? You have 4,000 friends on Facebook?
I don't know.
Even though I'm very playful with Rose, it makes me uncomfortable that Rose has so many friends online. I have maybe 1,000 friends, and she has almost 4,000.
Okay, Ed, you're doing one of those things where, and it was a very interesting progression. You notice that Ed says, how do I know that you really love me? Like you say you love me, but why do you really love me? And this is a common question that a lot of us have. It's like, well, you can say you love me, but I'm not really feeling it. So convince me. This is a bid for love, a bid for attachment security. Nothing wrong with that. I encourage all of you out there, if you're in a romantic relationship or any relationship for that matter, that when you feel the need, you ask for reassurance that the relationship is strong. With your spouse, you can say, do you really love me? Because for whatever reason right now, I'm just feeling a little insecure about that. Could you somehow prove it to me? And when you are asked that question, make sure you have ways of doing that. Now, you don't have to be a poet or a songwriter to prove that you love someone, but go to your heart and think, okay, well, why do I love this person? What is it about them that I love? How does this person make me feel? So he did that. He said, how do I know that you love me for me? And maybe it's a language barrier. Maybe it's a comfortability for Rose. Maybe Rose doesn't really love him for who he is. We don't know yet. And she responds in a very amorphous way that's not very satisfying to Ed, which I could understand. Then the next thing he goes to is, you have thousands of friends on Facebook. I only have 1,000. Ed is insecure about his security with Rose. Nothing wrong with that. He tried to get security through one way. It didn't work well for whatever reason. And his anxiety is going up. Although he comes across as sort of a jovial guy, inside of him, likely right now, he's very afraid. And so he focuses on a particular detail. That's what we do. When we feel that attachment insecurity, we look for something to sort of latch onto, when in reality, we're just afraid of the attachment. And there might not be very many stable handholds to hold on to, particularly because Rosemary wasn't really being very forthcoming with words of love and reassurance. So he focuses on, it's that Facebook thing. It gives something to do, it gives somewhere to focus your anxiety. He says, you have too many friends on Facebook. And essentially what he's saying is, because you have 3,500 friends on Facebook, you're a slut, is essentially what he's saying. Or she is too indiscriminate with her relationships, which is absurd. And basically what he's saying here is, I want you to get rid of those other friends because if we're going to be together, then you need to follow certain rules, which is not a good way to start a relationship. There's nothing wrong with asking someone, I need you to reassure me that you really love me. Nothing wrong with that. Let's see how they manage this together.
I worry. I mean, why do you have so many friends on Facebook? I wonder if you talk to them like you talk to me.
No. It's only you.
And I'm also worried about your ex-boyfriend. Is he there? She's not answering.
You don't want to read into too much of this because her internet connection could have just gotten bad in that moment. But there's a tiny little yellow flag that indicates, one, when he feels attachment insecurity and his functional ways of getting that security are not met, then he starts to go to dysfunctional ways, like accusing her of having too many friends on Facebook, having contact with her ex-boyfriend, being accusatory. That is not a good pattern. And then so that's a yellow flag. And then there's another yellow flag that she's not answering Skype or whatever right now, and or she decided to bounce out of the conversation because she didn't like the way things are going. That's another yellow flag of like, instead of her being able to say, hey, I'm getting a tone that you're accusing me of having too many friends on Facebook and contact with my ex-boyfriend. I don't like your tone, and if you just want to ask for reassurance, I'm happy to give it, but back off. I've already told you that you're the one, and that I'm not flirting on Facebook, and I don't have contact with my ex. I don't want to get back together with my ex. So, I don't like this controlling tone from you. It takes a very differentiated, mature person to be able to say that to your spouse. She doesn't seem like that sort of person. We'll see. But there's a possibility that what she just did was a passive aggression. She is upset, which is understandable, at Ed for being accusatory and basically calling her a cheating slut. She didn't like that. She's hurt by that. She's angry. And instead of saying, hey, I need you to back off, which would be fine, she doesn't answer the Skype as a way of sending this passive aggression message and hoping that he will receive the message as, ooh, I need to back off. Now, under most circumstances, people don't understand passive aggression messages. They're so passive and so confusing. The intended recipient of the message often walks away going like, well, okay, I guess I have to be stronger next time about the ex-boyfriend and make sure we establish a stronger connection over the internet or something. So I don't know, just some yellow flags. We'll see how that plays out.
Rose is very evasive when I talk about her past. She shuts down. She doesn't want to talk about it. And that bothers me. Based on this conversation tonight, I'm going to ask that she take an STD test. If I'm going to this level of commitment, I need to know that she is being honest.
So again, we're adding a third dysfunction. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing mutual STI tests. There's nothing wrong with that. I wish more people would do this. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, we're about to have sex in a bit, and I'd like us both to get STI tests. How do you feel about that? Now, it's a negotiation, and maybe it's a deal breaker for you, and you're going to say, I require you to get one. But he's going to places like, you have too many Facebook friends, you have contact with your ex-boyfriend, and I need you to get an STI test. This is not a good start to a relationship.
I don't know anything about her past.
So two things. One is this is a common paranoia or concern that a lot of people will have, which is, I'm falling in love with you. And then for some people, we might latch onto this idea of like, well, how many people have you been with, or who have you been with? The bottom line is that most people have a sexual and romantic past prior to the relationship that they're in or starting. And we all just have to recognize that that's just normal. That's just the way things are. The other thing here is that there's a lot of socialization, particularly around gender, particularly for men, that states that it's a demeaning thing if you are with a woman who had a lot of previous partners. We're taught this through a lot of different subtle messages, through storytelling and just flat out moralizing towards men who get together with women that are seen as slutty or having been around the block a few times.
So this test needs to happen before I can be committed to Rose in any way.
All right. Well, that does it for my reaction to Season 4, Episode 1 for Ed and Rose. Tune in next time when I do episode 2. If you haven't already become a patron of the podcast, please do so by going to patreon.com. That's how I know you like what we're doing. And when you become a patron, it gives me the ability to do more stuff like this. So please do that. And please take care of yourself and take care of each other because you deserve it.